very pleased to talk about an issue that's very important to me, which is generative AI and education, opportunities and issues. Because generative AI is what colleagues at MIT have called an arrival technology. And it hasn't been planned in education, it's been imposed on education institutions. And until now, it's been led by students and then exploited by startup companies providing tools and software for students. It's hugely disruptive and it can harm education if it's not well managed. And institutions around the world are struggling to cope with this new technology. Back in 2023, I realized that the early versions of GPT from the OpenAI company would have major impact on education. And one of the studies that I did was to look at what would happen if it was used to generate a student essay. And so I wrote a prompt to GPT. You're a student on a Master of Education course. Write a high-quality 500-word essay on a critique of learning styles. The essay should include academic references and evidence from research studies. It should begin, the construct of learning styles is problematic because. I gave that as a prompt to the early version of GPT, and it produced something that looked like a student essay. Now, at that time, there were still problems with it. It still made up facts. It did what has been called hallucination. And so it was worrying both that it was the simulation of a student essay, but was not accurate. Then, when I repeated this a number of times, by 2024 with GPT-4, it was producing not only the appearance of a student essay, but also an accurate student essay with no errors, with accurate references. Now, this is clearly a problem for assessment, for traditional means of assessment. So how should institutions react? Well, the first thing is that humans cannot reliably detect AI. There was a study done by colleagues at the University of Reading in the UK. They carried out a rigorous blind study in which they added 100% AI written submissions into their examination system. And they asked academics to grade the essays. Those academics didn't know that some of them were AI generated. And what the study found was that AI generated undergraduate assignments were on average half a grade boundary higher than those of real students. So the essays were graded as better than those of real students. And also 94% of the AI submissions were undetected by human assessors. So humans can't reliably detect AI. There have been some new tools, computer-based detectors, that claim to use pattern matching to classify texts as whether they are written by humans or by AI. And basically, these computer-based detectors are based on the assumption that humans are more unpredictable, more varied in their writing style, and that AI is more predictable. And they look for variations in the text. However, these are not fully reliable. And moreover, they are more likely to misclassify the text of non-native English writers. And that makes sense, that non-native English writers are more likely to write in a more constrained style, a style more like AI. And so it's clear that neither humans nor computer-based detectors are able to tell whether a text is written by a human student or by an AI. So institutions around the world are really faced with four choices. Should they ban AI from those institutions, but confident students will still continue to use AI and will challenge the decisions that are based on AI detectors? Institutions can evade by setting up invigilated face-to-face exams, but these are costly and limited. They can adapt, but that requires new methods of assessment, new policies and guidelines, or they can embrace AI, but that involves a long process of building trust. And most of the institutions I have been working with have taken the policy of adapting, which really requires adopting new types of assessment. In the UK, the Russell Group of universities very early on produced a set of principles on the use of generative AI in education. And that Russell Group constitutes the leading universities in the UK, such as Oxford University, Cambridge, University College London. And they have created a valuable and valid set of guidelines for assessment and for developing new AI policy. And I really recommend that report. So this is the emerging policy and strategy, that institutions are now moving towards more authentic assessments, such as project work, where students apply their knowledge and skills to plausible situations. They're establishing guidelines for students and staff in appropriate use of generative AI, reassuring and supporting students in becoming AI literate and helping them to develop strategies for effective learning, and explaining to students how they should acknowledge use of generative AI in assignments, and managing suspected breaches of guidelines when students do use AI against policy. But I want to take a more positive view of this. In 2019, I wrote a book called Practical Pedagogy, and in that book, I set out 40 new ways to teach and learn, and you can see those 40 ways there. A few months ago, I went back to that book and I asked myself the question, how many of those could be enhanced with the use of AI? And to my surprise, the answer was all of them. Any of those methods of teaching and learning could be improved with the use of AI. And I'm just going to give you one or two quick examples. So firstly, AI can act as a personal tutor. And you can see here a prompt template for personal tutoring. You're an expert tutor in some topic. I'm a secondary school student. I want you to tutor me in that topic. You should assume and give the level of ability. You should tutor step by step through a chat dialogue, continually assessing my current state of knowledge, asking one question at a time, and adjusting your teaching to my response. When I ask, you should provide a summary of my current knowledge of the topic to give to my teacher. And that's a general template that you can use for students to be given personalized tutoring on any topic. And also, it can work as a dynamic assessor. At the end of that student's interaction with the AI, the student can then ask, please summarize my current knowledge. And it will give a summary of their interaction with the system, their current knowledge from the system, which they could then, for instance, give to a human teacher or tutor. A method of interaction that I particularly like is a Socratic opponent. In this, an individual or in a group activity, students engage in a dialogue or an argument with the AI. So the idea is that rather than teaching it, using it as a source of knowledge, they're using it as a source of disagreement or argumentation. For example, if I give it the prompt, can conflict be fruitful? Then it will come back with a response, and then I can then engage in a discussion around that response. I can engage in a conversation to try and argue against it, and then use that as a basis for an argumentative essay. It can work as a co-designer. AI can assist a group of students throughout a design process to define the problem, to challenge assumptions, to brainstorm ideas and produce prototypes. And you can see an example on the right. Brainstorm imaginative ideas for new forms of consumer digital media powered by AI. Highlight each idea in bold. And it comes back with 10 good suggestions for starting a design project. As well as that, as well as working in terms of dialogue with generative AI, you can now also create your own custom GPTs, your own custom chatbots. So a colleague of mine, Simon Buckingham-Shum at Sydney University in Australia, has produced something he calls Question Reframer. You ask it a question, and instead of giving just a simple answer to that question, it helps you to understand and to identify assumptions behind your question. So instead of just giving a simple answer, it asks you to explore that question in more detail. So it's a way of helping you to understand the question in more depth. And I myself have developed a similar sort of chatbot, but for teachers. So for teachers, you can ask it as a teacher a question, for example, on a good method of teaching. You might ask it, what's a good method to enhance the effectiveness of teaching within a university lecture? And it will give you an example based on my book, Practical Pedagogy, 40 New Ways to Teach and Learn. So it's a way of providing an interaction with an academic text in a way that teachers can use. So these are just a few of the roles for generative AI in education. It can be a possibility engine to generate alternative ways of expressing an idea, a Socratic opponent in an argument, collaboration coach to help groups of students research and solve problems, as a lesson planner, as a quiz generator, a personal tutor, a dynamic assessor, a co-designer, an exploratorium to explore and interpret data, and as a storyteller. But I just want to finish by saying that with each major new technology, we underestimate the power of the social. And I want to suggest that AI has not by any means ended its development. And I think the next stage in generative AI is likely to be as it integrates with social media and as it becomes a tool for social interaction. And I wrote a paper recently called Towards Social Generative AI for Education, Theory, Practices and Ethics. And I suggest we need to prepare now for a future where generative AI can engage in large-scale social interactions on social media, it can engage in verbal tutoring, can engage in large-scale discussions. So we should prepare for a future of social generative AI. And there is a real need for AI literacy, not only to understand the technology of AI, but to understand how to engage constructively with it, with roles for AI in education, in the workplace, in commerce and entertainment, and the ethics of AI, issues such as copyright and plagiarism, its implicit bias, including its cultural bias and misinformation, and the ethical choices that we need to make in choosing what AI to use and how to deploy it. And to finish, teaching is a caring profession. We care for our students. We care about accuracy, integrity, truth. We care about professional expertise. We care about our human knowledge and experience. But AI is intrinsically uncaring. It doesn't have that wealth of human experience on which to base its responses. And so we, as teachers, as educators, need to use generative AI with care. We need to bring human care and empathy to AI in education. We should explore new roles for AI based on effective methods of teaching and learning. And we badly need AI literacy to address AI concepts, ethics, careers, and its impact on society. And I want to end with just a few resources. The book that I wrote called Story Machines, How Computers Have Become Creative Writers, about the fascinating history of machines as writers of stories. A more recent book, An Introduction to Narrative Generators, which is a technical book about how computers create works of fiction. And I very much recommend a resource from UNESCO called ChatGPT and Artificial Intelligence in Higher Education, a quick start guide. So I hope that has been a short but useful guide to how generative AI is being used in education and what the future holds. Thank you.